Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. All right, we got another 2A update for you. Now, this one is really interesting. Again, this one comes from our friends at Ammo Land, Mr. Dean Weingarten. All right, a court finds that convicted felons have Second Amendment rights. All right, well, this has been a very controversial subject for a long time. You know, a lot of my colleagues and I have discussed this, over the years and given a lot of opinion on this. So it's going to be really interesting to see what exactly was found in this particular court proceeding. So we're going to get into this. Before we do, I would like to thank our friends at CMMG for supporting our efforts here on the channel. If you're looking for anything in the AR category, they are your go-to people. They got some really awesome tech. Their bufferless descent line's really great. They now have their Mark 47, which is their 7.62x39 hybrid platform in a bufferless descent line now. So you got the side charging handle, folding stock, really cool gun. Also, their 22 conversion kits are absolutely epic. One of the best ones on the market, if not the best one on the market. Tell CMMG that we sent you. Great group of people, wonderful Americans, and big thanks to them for supporting my effort here on the channel. So let's get into this. On May 9th, 2024, a three-judge panel of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit published a split decision vacating the conviction of Stephen Duarte, I probably mispronounced that name terribly, for violating 18 U.S. Code 922 G1, yada, yada, yada. Okay. That essentially makes it a crime for any person to possess a firearm if he has been convicted of an offense punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year. Essentially, let's just say a felony, right? Let's see. He'd been previously convicted of 5 nonviolent crimes in California. Under California law, each offense could result in a prison term of more than 1 year, making them felonies according to federal law. The 5 convictions were for the following: vandalism, felon in possession of a firearm, possession of a controlled substance, and 2 counts of evading a police officer. Well, I guess he tried to run away twice, I suppose. But anyway, given the history of the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, it is almost certain the government of California will ask for an en banc review of this case, and it's likely to be granted. So essentially, the character of this gentleman is impossible to determine from what little we are told about the case. And it should have nothing to do with the determination of whether, that particular code is unconstitutional. It is the nature of the system that multiple charges be dropped during plea bargaining in exchange for a guilty plea on one charge. At first glance, a recent state of California Supreme Court decision about evading a police officer seems relevant. On May 2nd, the Supreme Court of the state of California issued an opinion striking down some instances of evading a police officer as probable cause for detaining an individual. These charges are quite different. The felony convictions of evading a police officer on his record are almost certainly for evading a police officer while in a vehicle. In essence, this means fleeing police in pursuit in a vehicle. Those convictions are probably California Vehicle Code 2800.2, felony reckless evading. The charge is a wobbler, meaning it can be charged as a misdemeanor or a felony. The California Supreme Court decision on evading a police officer does not affect charges of fleeing from a police officer in a vehicle and is irrelevant to this case. So essentially, this guy's not an angel, so they're not trying to paint this guy as being some saint or an angel or anything, but what they're saying is this does pave the way, essentially, for saying that, just because someone is convicted of a felony, it doesn't mean that they, are not able to own firearms, especially if that is a nonviolent felony. Okay. Now, someone can say all day long that running from the police or being in possession of a controlled substance or engaging in vandalism, while those may be a crime and while you may be put in jail for some period of time, and while some of those charges may in fact be felonies, the nature of the felony apparently is going to have to be taken into account to some form or fashion. I mean, I think many people can agree that if someone went on some murdering spree and got sent to prison, and obviously that's a felony, right? Murder is a capital offense, a felony, right? Well, if someone went on some murdering spree and spent 35 years or 40 years in prison, and then they get out of prison, there's an argument that some people pose that say, well, if he's reformed and you get out of prison after 40 years and you murdered a bunch of people 40 years ago, you should have your gun rights restored. There's a lot of people, many of my colleagues, in fact, that say, well, that person should have their gun rights restored, right? And there's people that say, well, if it's a nonviolent felony, even if it's a year-long sentence, and let's say they, I don't know, serve 6 months, but see, since they were convicted of a crime that they could serve more than a year in prison, and then they're technically labeled a felon, depending on the charge or whatever, let's just say it's a felony charge to keep things simple. Well, then the argument would be, well, if it's not violent and it's a short little stint in prison and they serve their time, then they should get out and have their full rights restored. But under the current way things are set up, when you're a felon, you lose, certain rights, and you lose your right to bear arms. And I believe you lose your right to vote, if I'm not mistaken, too. So there's certain things, society paints a very ugly picture of you if you are a convicted felon, and then you want to go back out in society, try to get a normal job, and they do a search on your criminal record, and they say, you're a convicted felon. Yeah, imagine getting a white collar, desk job or a normal job. No, you're going to be working as a freaking fry cook somewhere. It's going to have a difficult time trying to find employment being a convicted felon. Even if people see the word felon and they automatically assume you're the worst freaking scum of the earth person that could ever exist. And that may not, look, there's different degrees of scumbaggery here, okay? And I guess with the issue at hand here is what people are trying to come up with is that if it's a non-violent felony charge, then it should be taken into account that, hey, if you served your time and you've paid your debt to society. Now, some would argue even if you were some murderer or violent person. Now, this is my response to that. People aren't going to like this, but this is the way that I respond to that type of inquiry. When people say, well, Eric, how do you feel if a violent criminal is let loose into society? Should we just go the full route of saying, well, you're going to get your rights restored because you served your debt to society? I think that what we should really be asking ourselves is if a person is too dangerous to be in society armed, then they're probably too dangerous to be alive, right? So you can't say, well, yeah, you did all this heinous stuff, but it wasn't enough for us to kill you. It wasn't enough for us to, engage in some capital punishment and execute you, right? Well, it wasn't bad enough to execute you, so we're going to let you serve some period of time in prison, after which we're going to let you go and turn you loose back into society. Well, guess what? If you make the decision to turn somebody loose back into society, then you must assume they're going to get a gun, whether you give them the right to get a gun or not. So the question at hand is someone safe enough to be alive in the public environment? Are they safe enough to be alive at large? If the answer is yes, then they should have their gun rights restored. Hello? Because they're free in society. They're going to steal a gun or make a gun or however they get a gun. If they got a gun before to commit a crime that got them in that situation in the first place, then they're going to find it again. There ain't nothing that's going to stop them. So in my mind, if someone is not safe enough to exist in society with all the rights and privileges they're in, then they don't need to be alive, right? And that comes down to our criminal justice system being properly applied and administered, and making sure that the arbiters of this justice are not a bunch of weak-minded people who are just pandering to some political environment and not the law. And that's the issue that we have at hand. We're not tough enough on really, truly violent people in our society that need to be put away forever and throw away the key or worse, right? Now, here's my other issue with that is that I don't trust these people to be the arbiters of justice. I don't trust them to do the right thing. I don't trust their judgment. So it becomes an issue where now we say, what? Is it now jury nullification? Does that mean that now as a society we must paint a much stricter picture of who we will convict of a violent crime? Are we just going to have a jury go in and just nullify every crime we think it wasn't a crime? I mean, that's where we're at with this. So when, as a society, are we going to say, look, if someone commits a terribly heinous, violent, universally awful crime, some really horrible capital thing, rape, with triple homicide, or some crazy stuff, murdering spree, mass shooter, whatever you're going to say, right? Someone goes on a crazy killing spree. That person needs to be removed from the gene pool, right? We need to just come to the acceptance that do not pass go, do not collect $200. There were multiple witnesses. They got you from 3 different camera angles. They know you did it. There's no question about, oh, is there more evidence? No, like they know. Everyone saw you do it, caught you red-handed. Open and shut, textbook case of, hey, we got you, right? In that type of situation, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Send that person straight to Hades because they don't need to be alive, right? And don't sit here and pretend like, oh, they're going to be reformed and they're going to not get out and do it again. They're not going to reoffend. And then say, well, we're going to take their gun rights away and that'll keep them from getting a gun. Yeah, sure. Trust me, they're going to get a freaking gun again. Don't you worry about that. I think that's the greater view in play that we have to ask ourselves is, do we really want violent people alive in society after they have committed a truly heinous and violent act? And we're going to have to ask ourselves some very difficult questions as a society. And believe me, I've been preaching to the choir about this for years. I think there's probably a lot of people that agree with me. I'm sure there's going to be some people that disagree with me. But at the end of the day, it's going to be what it's going to be. A person who ran from a cop or has a little bit of a controlled substance or maybe engaged in some vandalism. Now, while those things are terrible or whatever, is it the same felony as someone who heinously tortured and murdered and raped and otherwise, absolutely did some terrible, heinous thing to someone? And I think the answer is those two crimes are not the same and they should not be treated the same. And if someone serves their little time in prison, let's say it's a few years or something, they do a year and get off on parole for good behavior or whatever, or they appeal it and life goes on and they view it as a mistake and they're reformed and they get out and they're on the straight and narrow, they got a job, they're paying their taxes, they're raising a family, then by all means, they deserve to have their rights restored, no matter what the felony was, if it wasn't violent. Anyway, this paints a picture that the needle is moving on that particular subject. So I wanted to kind of share this, and I'm going to include a link to this particular article if you want to read a little bit more on your own and dive into it a little bit further. But good reporting there, Dean, and I wanted to share this. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Many more on the way. We'll see you soon.